Well, good morning, everybody. Our all hazards map this morning kind of reveals the strength of the pattern that is currently going across the country. We have a very tightly wound low that will end up over parts of the western and central Cornbelt later on this afternoon, and it's got quite a punch that it's packing. And some of the evidence of that is in the fact that we've got winter storm watches, winter weather advisories, a frost advisory in this part of the Snake River Valley, telling me that on the back side of this, we've got plenty of cold air coming in through this direction. And why this is important is this is going to increase the upper level winds that are going to become screaming across this part of the country at jet stream level, while the deep low starts to build here again over parts of the western Corn Belt. We have wind advisories around this. This is all flood watch. Severe thunderstorm watches have already been issued in this particular shade. We have several places this morning with severe thunderstorm warnings, including a tornado warning early right here, leaving parts of Nebraska going into Iowa. So the setup is here, and we need to discuss where this pattern is going to be going here in the very near term. Already through the last 24 hours, we've seen repeated rounds of storms that have come out of Nebraska, going into Iowa and stretching into this area, including some nasty storms yesterday that were in parts of Illinois, coming right over Lake Michigan. That's not to ignore the other parts of this system, but this is going to be a pretty active corridor again today because of what that upper level wind is doing. So get yourself oriented here on the map. I want you to see a couple of things. We've got a pretty strong jet streak coming through here. There's another one running over the top of the ridge there. And we have a trough that's actually got a couple of pieces to it. So you can see the main trough axis here, but there's a secondary one here. And the net effect of that is to give us very strong upper level divergence right into this particular area, which means we're going to be dropping a surface low in there very quickly. But if you take note of the wind shear direction across Iowa, across Wisconsin, Minnesota, parts of Illinois, coming out of northern Missouri and Nebraska right in through here, and start to step this down from jet stream level winds down to, well, let's go down to 500 millibars next. Again, very strong mid-level winds. Getting closer to the surface, you see the low tightening up right in through this area. And this means that this particular system by mid-afternoon is going to be very strongly forced. There's going to be plenty of lift in the atmosphere. And just taking a look at where there is ridging over the southeast, the flow coming up out of the Gulf of Mexico, the dry air coming in on the backside, we kind of have all the ingredients we need to produce kind of a multi-hazard storm system here with respect to storm type and structure and timing. So we need to know where things are already. So we're going to watch a radar animation. It goes back to last night through early this morning at the storms that are already present. And what we're concerned about is, I think, 2 to 3 different rounds of these storms. So already early this morning, so there's the individual convection from last night. We have a Boeing segment that's here, one that is here crossing between Nebraska and Iowa, and then later on this afternoon, the upper level low, which is still way in the back here, is going to be moving into and running across parts of Nebraska into Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, northern Missouri. And these storms, take a look at this one right here, have already had a history of producing a lot of severe weather. If we just have a quick look at the storm reports just in the last day or so, we have had 184 reports. These storms are known for making hail. They also produced a lot of straight line wind damage, and we're going to watch them again light up in this particular area later on today. So the Storm Prediction Center yesterday about midday upgraded this area to a moderate risk. They've now expanded that in the overnight hours through this morning, covering a lot of Iowa, this part of western, northwestern Illinois, northern parts of Missouri, getting into Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota as well. And as we think it through, let's just start to see what some of the models are doing. It seems as though the high-resolution rapid refresh model, the HRRR, has been well initialized with this morning's storms. So we're going to watch the morning event roll through, and then we're going to watch by midday, before midday, for another round of storms to blow up right here in this part of Nebraska and Iowa. This may get up into parts of southern Minnesota as well. What we'll see here is the potential for early discrete single-celled storms or supercells. They're kind of the ones that produce the greatest risk for large hail, and they rotate, so we could see some tornadoes out of this. Then in this afternoon, we start to see that initial clustering of discrete supercells begins to line itself out. And the concern here is that, this line of storms, because of how just strongly forced the system is with its wind field, could move very quickly, and the storm dynamics adding to the synoptic dynamics. In other words, the spin of the storms themselves and their forward motion, like their own updraft and downdraft, helps propel them forward in an environment that's already spinning quite quickly. So the concern is as these move forward, they could be quite strong and produce some straight line wind damage. To give you a sense on timing, it seems as though this could all be late morning to early afternoon, and then it'll be late afternoon to early evening for the squall line that moves farther to the east here, stretching again from Minnesota and Wisconsin, pretty far to the north here, all the way down through parts of Missouri. And this will then, to this evening, cross the Mississippi, get into central Wisconsin, get into Illinois, southern Missouri, and continue to move east. And you notice it kind of starts to break apart a bit here. Some of this is due to the environment that's out ahead of it. Some of it is also due just to the time of day. And we'll have to watch how these storms survive the overnight hours and where they continue to push into really favorable conditions versus where they could fall apart. It seems as though the southern edge has the best chance at surviving the overnight hours into early Wednesday morning. And the high-res rapid refresh model here through Wednesday afternoon is going to continue to monitor this region for the risk of these strong to severe storms. Now behind it, we have our next trough coming through, and we're going to need to talk about what this one could potentially do to the northwest, because as you saw a moment ago, as you see that guy coming through here, it is delivering quite a bit of moisture into the northwest and is going to be another quite vigorous storm system. To get to that point, though, I want to show you that tomorrow on day 2, this would be the 22nd of May, we have this elongated region right here where the Ohio and Mississippi come together all the way down through this part of central Texas that's under an enhanced risk. But we'll keep an eye out on that entire frontal boundary into day 2. In day 3, we're going to watch again. One front will linger. Next low comes out. It'll use that point right in through here where this all meets to develop a large area for the risk of severe thunderstorms down here in the southern plains, getting over to parts of the Mid-South and the Delta region. Okay, so that's just your next 3 days. Let's go ahead and have a look at a different model. This will be the NAM. This one runs out 60 hours. And the NAM I do not think was as well initialized as the HER was, just based on where it has convection at 7 a.m. this morning. But we're going to watch to see if it does the same thing with the discrete cells mid-afternoon pulling into a large line in through here, which we do see that. It then moves over toward the river by about 7 o'clock. That makes sense. And then in the evening hours moves forward, and you can see the larger line of storms here. The HER kind of broke these apart earlier than the NAM does, but they still break apart when they get into Michigan and Indiana in the models. We'll need to watch to see if they are able to maintain themselves despite the models kind of knocking them out. So this is now 12 a.m. Wednesday. There's our next system. Here's one curling out. Here's the next one coming through. And then what we're going to watch is, remember I said those lingering frontal boundaries, they stall out down here. So Wednesday afternoon and evening, that's where we're going to watch for the reinitialization of severe storms right in through this corridor. So this is all from a lingering frontal boundary from that guy up here. The next low then shows up here in the Pacific Northwest, curls up pretty tight. Look at that upslope flow into parts of Montana, meaning more moisture for Montana. Lingering storms into early morning here on Thursday. And then we're going to watch again this corridor in through here, lighting up storms on Thursday night using the energy from this low that's back and farther to the north and west. This is kind of going to start to tag team at that point. So one thing to look at here, how much moisture is the NAM putting down? If we just kind of play this out, you can now see why there's the flood watches and warnings that are out for this region as this low curls its way through this trek through parts of South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, getting up into Minnesota, especially into Minnesota, does have the potential for grabbing 2, 3, 4 inches of rainfall. Then the lingering frontal boundary down here, some of these storms have the ability to drop a lot of rain in this area. Now, I've shown you the next 3 days, and we've seen the next system coming through, and it's important to note that as we get into Saturday, this would be the day 4 outlook, and then Sunday, if we get into Saturday, day 5 outlook, and Sunday, day 6, we're going to watch these two areas coming out of part of the Red River Valley, heading over to the Ohio River Valley and the Mid-Mississippi River Valley for Sunday. So still we're on for several more days of the risk of severe weather. Okay, that's a pretty quick rundown, but I need you to get the main points here. Make sure that you understand your resources today. Have access to good radar data. You know my favorite radar app, it's called Radar Scope, but if you want to just use College of DuPage, go use their radar data. It's very good as well. Great mosaics. Next, make sure you're checking in with weather.gov. That's just a great place to see all of the hazards. They have all the watches and warnings out. You'd be able to stay on top of this. The Storm Prediction Center website is a great one as well, spc.noaa.gov. And also, another favorite radar app is called Radar Omega. I like that one as well. Now, that's your near-term high-impact weather that's coming through. I want to stretch this out and start to talk about something else here. Because yesterday I said we have to watch to see if there's any reason that this pattern is going to make a change after the next 7 or 8 days. And I want to show you what it needs to change from. So from mid-April to the beginning of May, this was the problem. We saw ridging building into this area. And that produced troughing downstream, which means the flow came around this with slight ridging in April that sat over the southeast. This is what kept it quite warm here. And this took the flow and made a hard turn like this. Now, when you get to May 1st and add up what we've seen since May 1st, this is what's happened. Deeper lows have formed here. They have sent troughs out, which have dove into the south or dived into the south here and continue to keep this pattern extremely active. This is the pattern we're in now. What's been interesting is we've also had a low north of Hawaii, causing a lot of inclement weather in Hawaii, if you've been keeping up with that. What I am interested in is to know if this ends up bridging. Because if that's the case, what we'll do is we'll move this ridge a little closer to the west and this ridge back toward, back toward the west. So this moves towards the western United States. This moves to the west. And the reason I'm concerned about this is that would shift this whole pattern, including this trough, farther to the east. And this was the pattern change we had talked about in yesterday's video. This is what would have to happen to slow this all down. And it's not happening in the next week. So take a good snapshot of this, okay? And I want you to see what the new models are doing. So this is the AIFS, which I feel has had a really good handle on this pattern. That's the Artificial Intelligence Forecasting System. So there are your troughs. There's one, and there's two. There's the ridge on this side. That's the one that I want to watch to see if it goes that way. Here's the ridge on this side. I want to see if it goes this way. And here's where this trough is letting out all of these little short waves that have come across the United States to give us all the severe weather we've seen, plus the incredibly heavy rains. Now let's just see what this does. We know that the next week we're not going to get much of a change in it. This is through Thursday, getting into Friday. I mean, we see the same setup here, multiple troughs of low pressure diving through. We get into Sunday and Monday and Tuesday of next week. We're still in this pattern. But do you see how once we get past Tuesday into Wednesday, something did change a bit? This ridge is now strengthening and moving a bit that direction. And the troughs, which had been entering the country this way, now seem to be forming a bit here. We see this highly amplified ridge in place right there. Now, listen, before I go another step, this is the 29th of May. What's the failure mode? If this ridge doesn't retrograde and this trough doesn't form well off the west coast, then this whole thing falls apart. We go back to where we've been because I don't have any other changes to talk about here. This is what would need to occur in order for there to be a pattern break sometime 9 days from now. And what this would give us is flow over the top of the ridge and heat throughout the Rocky Mountains. Flow coming out of the northwest through the Midwest. That would indicate a drier pattern. We would be more inclement with the weather into New England. That would be on the exit side of the trough. But that would give a break in the midsection of the country to all of the weather that has been going through severe weather, nonstop rains, and issues like this. Now, let's just leave it here and ask other models. So let's go up here to the ensemble. So hang on just a second. I got to go back to the previous run and get you out there at the same time frame, which was about right here. The European ensemble also has these same features. See the trough, downstream ridge, and the GFS does as well. So that starts to say that what you've got over the next 7 days, which looks like this is the European Ensemble Precipitation Anomaly forecast for the next 7 days. And it is not without its problems. Like the dryness that's coming into this area, some of the models are predicting evaporation rates everywhere inside of that little arc I drew of up to 3 inches just in the next 7 days because of the heat, the wind, and the dry conditions. but we have the continued delays in planting here, the very wet weather coming through the Mid-South causing delays there. This is a good thing. We need it to be drier along the Gulf Coast, given how wet things have been as of late. More moisture for Montana. Decent moisture for parts of the Canadian Prairie. Not going to complain about that, but this is the next week. This is week 2. And I'm going to show you the other models in a few moments. And what's important about this is this, to me, says slow it down. We could still see storms in this vicinity, only because whenever we build a ridge like this, we still pull in some Gulf moisture, and these storms just pop on the heat of the day. But other than that, it appears that the pattern is going to start to slow down 9 days from now, maybe about 8 days from now. If any of that changes, and I've misanalyzed this, I will tell you. I'll let you know right away. But that's what I've currently got. Now, until then, we've got to deal with this. Here's our next 7 days, of course, including today's system, the lingering frontal boundary, the system that comes into the northwest that delivers all of this. We then see the national blend of models showing a very similar situation, and that lines up pretty well with the WPC forecast. So we're 3 models into our 5-model analysis. Here is the European model 7-day forecast, and here is the GFS 7-day forecast. And there's a lot of similarities in the kind of precipitation patterns you just saw in these models. We'll go ahead and do our comparison between the GFS and the European model. As we play this forward, we've already looked at system number 1. There's the lingering frontal boundary. On the backside, the next low already moving through, giving us some snow into the Rockies here. We'll take a look at how much in a moment. And then we're going to watch. Remember, I said these work together late this week on Thursday night, increasing the risk of the severe storms here. It's in both models. The lows link up. All right, so one low leaves the front, the next one grabs hold of it, and the coldest core of the storm is right in through here. So this is Friday getting into Saturday. Excuse me, that's all day Friday. Here's Saturday. And this could be the 26th, our last kind of bowling ball trough coming through, the lingering front over this part of the, the Mid-South, Western Cornbelt Plains, this region. Missouri Valley is what it's called, I guess. And then watch, Monday into Tuesday of next week. Nothing's following this. So we get that out, and it seems like a bit of a break. That's what I'm hinging all of this on. Now, until then, I don't think there's any surprises here. Chance of getting an inch in the next 7 days is very high across all these regions. We've hit these areas pretty hard. Let's take a look at the snow now. This is the probability of grabbing an inch over the next 7 days, and I just need to let you know that coming out of the mountains where the snow totals could be very high at high elevation, there's a corridor in through here that might see some snowflakes briefly as temperatures try to touch freezing way back here in parts of Montana and northern parts of North Dakota. Really, I mean, this is going to be a tough forecast. It's going to be all about timing. But this is what looks like on May 31st. And what do we not see? We don't see deep troughs of low pressure extending into the Midwest. Instead, the flow is doing something like this. And the subtropical jet is weaker. It meets up here. But that is a ridge in the central United States. And we have to ask how that's going to translate into a week 2 pattern. And the models did all of this. I showed you the European. Look at the agreement we've now got between the GFS and the CPC forecast. So there's a lot about this that's making sense. But I hope I'm not confirming some bias that I have as I look at it. But I want to let you know why I did that analysis so you could see why this could make sense into the week 2 time period, meaning the end of this month does slow down. Major failure mode is if the ridge that's south of Alaska comes right back roaring in full strength. Okay, from there, let's go look at temperatures. Can you see now where this patchy frost work is in through here? This could be that time period late this week as the low comes through that we get an early morning patchy frost. Outside of that, we're not concerned about much else here. This is all elevation driven in these areas, which is typical for this time of year. Okay, min temperatures. Nope, max temperatures. That's today's max temperature. Quite cold behind this system. There we go, Wednesday into Thursday. Friday, that would be the time frame over which that cold air sneaks through early in the morning. Triple digits almost all week long down here in this part of Texas. We get into Saturday and Sunday, and this will be the point, Sunday to Monday, where we're going to have to watch for the warmth to return this way. This cooler air, not cold, but slinks down into this area and shifts this whole pattern around. Until then, over the next 7 days, this is what your GDD forecast looks like. Persistent cooler air across the northern tier of the U.S. getting into this part of the plains means we're not accumulating much heat. But right south of that border, that boundary, you've got the ability to grab anywhere from 120 to up to 200 GDDs just in the next 7 days, and much higher the farther south we go. Day 5 through 10, this is where the shift begins to happen. I want to know if this warmth is really going to live here. This would give us flow that's doing something a bit like that, which is different than where we've been. And this is what day 10 through 15 is. We're going to have a discussion soon about what it means to be packing in heat in late May, early June into this area. Because if we do that, we don't have much more snow to evaporate. We will start to see a lot of the heat, which was going into evaporating water out of vegetation and then, of course, out of the snow. We'll start to go into a sensible heat flux, meaning we'll get a heat coming into the ground and then coming right back into the lower atmosphere. And that's why in both models we start looking out here and say, well, if that's day 5 through 10, and this is day 10 through 15, do we start to live in this pattern for a while into the month of June? And some of the models are hinting at that. Take a look at this temperature forecast from the European. It's a 7-day sliding window, now through the first week of June, through the second week of June, and out here toward the third week of June. You notice that as we go through this month of June, the models are trying to anchor quite a bit of heat in this area. And largely, I think it's going to be here, even though he's seeing the bullseye in this area, I think it's going to largely be running along the spine of the Rocky Mountains, getting into the plains. And over that same time frame, the models are suggesting that the precipitation pattern really slows down and starts to dry out. There is one difference, right? We've seen this from the European model, but we know that the front half of June may continue to carry a bit of a stormy bias in this area as the heat builds into this region. And I have to see if this is really the case, if we're going to continue to recycle moisture with daily storms while the ridge begins to take shape in this part of the country. At some point, we'll switch into a summer pattern where these storms now come from northwest flow, but initially it won't. I want to give you a quick summary of all of the long-range models just so you have this. This is the CPC's forecast for June through August. We've discussed this a lot over the last couple of weeks, but I want to be able to compare it, the temperature and precip forecast, to the European model. And we start to see some similarities in these forecasts. There's the CPC, there's the European, and then this gets us out there to the National Multi-Model Ensemble. You know, I don't often show you their temperature graphics, and one of the reasons is I don't like their color bar. It just kind of gets into these death colors of heat so fast that they're often misinterpreted, and it just looks like blazing hot everywhere. We then see the IRI multi-model probability forecast. So again, this is now probability of getting warmer than average, and again, we see the same areas with the risk of that drought in this region, followed by an active hurricane season. So to start to wrap this up, this is kind of the big thing we're going to keep an eye on. With our most recent satellite data, looking at ocean temperatures, watching this warm water move while cooler water stays here is going to be critical. Now, let me make one case, and this is very important if you're a Midwestern farmer right now under incredibly heavy rain and severe weather. And the rest of the country will respond to this. If this fails to warm this region up, if this warm water fails to warm this whole region up here, then this stays colder and this stays colder. The summer drought risk in the Midwest goes through the roof. If this warm water does push in, even if this stays cool and this stays cool, if this warm water does push in, we get into a hot stormy pattern throughout the Midwest, Mid-South, Southeast, East, and the risk of the heat comes back to the west. Then we followed up with what could be a very active hurricane season, and I hope you all got a chance to watch Levi Cowan's video. It was great. The guy's brilliant, and he was very, very informative about what he thinks this hurricane season is going to be. Again, go to Tropical Tidbits and you can find it. Okay, one last thing for today. If we have a look at the implications of the warm water getting into the Pacific Northwest, into the Gulf of Alaska, then this is why through August we see drought expanding in the areas with this color. In other words, the CPC is following its own forecast with its drought outlook. And I just want you to see why they're showing that kind of risk going forward. So I'm going to stop it here. We'll pick up tomorrow with more information that comes to us. But just tonight, if you're in this area where that that moderate risk has been given, please just be very weather aware and have a lot of different ways by which you can have access to weather information. All right, have a good one. Thanks.